Mathias Cormann, welcome to 7:30.
Good to be here.
As I just mentioned, Australia's 2035 emissions target is expected next week. You recently warned Australia not to return to the climate wars by debating net zero 2050. What will be the consequences if your former coalition colleagues don't heed the warning?
Well, look, the point that I made the other week was that Australia signed on and ratified the Paris Agreement back in 2016. I mean, it was a coalition government that signed and ratified that agreement. And indeed, I mean, it includes a commitment to achieving net zero by 2050. And I guess the other point I made was that the most important focus should be on how we can achieve that objective, how we can achieve that target in the best possible way, in a way that preserves economic competitiveness, growth and opportunity.
I understand that you don't want to get into the politics, and we respect that. However, I think if I can put the question like this, how much is at stake in maintaining the net zero target for Australia?
Well, look, I mean, Australia signed on to that commitment back in 2016. We're part of a global effort to tackle climate change. We need to do that in a way that is globally effective and economically responsible. And I mean, I think there's very important public policy choices to be made along the way to ensure that we meet climate objectives in a way that preserves economic opportunity for people across Australia and all around the world.
I'm just going to ask you one more time about this, but in a slightly different way. You'll obviously be aware that Jacinta Price has gone to the back bench. In doing so, she said she will use her position to talk about, I quote, the economically immiserating and freedom-eroding policy of net zero. How much damage can that kind of language do?
I mean, Sarah, it is not for me to provide commentary on conversations in the Parliament in Australia. I respect without reservation the right of every elected member of Parliament to express their views freely. It's important in a democratic system for people to argue these things out. I think my position and the position of the OECD in relation to this is quite clear. We encourage and we urge governments around the world to pursue ambitious and globally effective action on climate change, to maintain a pathway to net zero, to do so in a way that preserves and enhances economic growth and opportunity. And that's really, so I mean, I think that from that point of view, my position is quite clear, but I, of course, encourage continued robust and vibrant debate in the Australian Parliament, in the great tradition of the Australian Parliament.
And does that include having private conversations about this topic with your West Australian Liberal colleagues?
I left politics in Australia some 5 years ago. I do not engage in, I'm not involved in party political developments these days. I'm leading an international organisation and I'm focusing on working with elected governments from around the world in relation to a whole range of economic, social and environmental policy challenges. I'm not involved in politics in Australia these days.
An OECD report last year said that achieving Australia's existing emissions targets would be challenging. Is that OECD speak for those targets actually being unrealistic?
No, that's not right. I mean, prior to this interview, I sort of reviewed the data again, and it looks to me as if Australia is well on track to meet its 2030 target. I'm sure the government right now is considering the advice of the Climate Change Authority on an appropriately ambitious but feasible target for 2035 on the pathway to net zero emissions by 2050.
Now, staying with the energy transition, should the Australian government be reconsidering its position on the potential role of nuclear energy in the energy mix?
Well, look, over the last two COPs in Dubai and in Baku, 30-odd countries around the world committed themselves to a tripling of nuclear energy capacity by 2050 as a key contribution towards meeting global net zero by 2050. It's also true that across the OECD, there's a diversity of perspectives. Some countries are taking steps to further expand nuclear capacity in their jurisdictions. Others who've previously decided to phase out nuclear have revisited that and are returning nuclear back into the energy mix. I mean, I understand that in Australia it's a contested conversation, but it's also true that Australia does have particular natural advantages when it comes to nuclear as part of an overall energy mix, contributing to achieving both energy security, energy reliability, energy affordability, and indeed low emission and meeting climate objectives.
It sounds like an argument for reopening the nuclear debate that appeared to be closed at the last election. You think it's in Australia's energy interests to reopen that debate seriously?
Well, look, I'm not getting involved in a partisan debate here. I don't think that there is anything inherently partisan about nuclear energy. I mean, I think the debate is always open. I mean, we're having the conversation now. And certainly in the context of wanting to preserve international competitiveness, wanting to ensure energy security and reliability, affordability, and meeting climate objectives, there's no doubt that this will continue to be part of the conversation, as it has been internationally over the last several years.
Let me talk about free trade. Both the Trump administration and China have badly undermined global free trade. Should there be a price to pay for both countries for doing that?
Well, look, I don't accept your characterization that way. Let me just say that, over the last several decades, global trade, open markets and rules-based global trade has made a very significant positive contribution to incomes and living standards around the world. More than 1 billion people were lifted out of poverty on the back of the global expansion of trade. But it's also true that there are a range of legitimate concerns in terms of the way the global rules-based trading system is operating. Concerns around non-market practices with competition, unfair competition implications, concerns about supply chain resilience, economic security, and the like. I guess, what we say from an OECD point of view is that it's going to be important to resolve legitimate concerns in terms of the way the global rules-based trading system is operating or not operating, to focus on making international trading arrangements fairer and function better in a way that preserves the economic benefits of open markets and rules-based trade. And that is best done by governments continuing to engage with each other bilaterally and multilaterally in positive cooperative dialogue. Now, when you sort of look past all the noise, a lot of that dialogue, a lot of these conversations are actually happening as we speak.
US courts, nonetheless, have found President Trump's baseline tariffs, including those against Australia, to be illegal. Is it the view of the OECD that those tariffs should be abandoned?
We are an intergovernmental international organization. The United States is a valued member of the organization. I work for and with democratically elected governments around the world. And, we of course, the OECD as an organization, stands, in support of the economic benefits of open markets and rules-based trade. But we also recognize that the rules-based trading system is in need of reform. And, we would favor an approach that makes international trading arrangements fairer and function better and addresses some of the substantive concerns without having to resort to tariffs, and in a way that helps to preserve the economic benefits of open markets and rules-based trade. But we also accept without reservation the rights of democratically elected governments to make judgments on what is in the best interests of their respective countries.
You've talked about potential gains for productivity coming from AI and the advantages that are being reaped by early adopters. Whose responsibility is it to ensure that whole parts of the economy don't get left behind?
Well, look, there's different aspects to this, and one of the most important aspects is to ensure that across the working population, people can be equipped with the skills required in order to be able to participate in and benefit from the opportunities that AI offers. I mean, you know, I think that one of the barriers to increased adoption and diffusion of AI moving forward, you know, is going to be in the area of skills and making sure that, as I say, workers, the working population has the appropriate levels of support there. I mean, look, there's a broad spectrum of public policy considerations here. You know, we essentially need to look at AI as a general purpose, you know, universal technology like electricity, you know, like telecommunication, and you know that brings with it some, you know, that brings with it some policy implications, including in terms of investment in necessary infrastructure, but also, as I say, skills.
The OECD economic report for Australia that was released in June said monetary easing was, quote, warranted. Do you expect to see, therefore, in Australia at least one more interest rate cut this year?
I mean, one thing that I learned many years ago is not to speculate on, you know, imminent monetary policy decisions. I mean, but in a general sense, what we would say is that it's appropriate for monetary and fiscal policy to remain prudent in the current global economic context. I mean, there is a risk that inflation could remain elevated for longer than previously anticipated. And so in that sense, I'm sure that the Reserve Bank in Australia is reviewing all of the data, you know, very carefully and making appropriate decisions at the appropriate time.
Mathias Cormann, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.